G'day ladies and gents, welcome to War Thunder with Mags, and welcome to the War Thunder patch 1.47 test server. I finally got on it. We're going to go through and have a little bit of a look at what's floating around. Now, as soon as I logged in, this was immediately what I encountered. This is the new daily reward system that's being added in patch 1.47. Now, as you go through, every day that you log on in sequence, you get access to a bigger reward. After 13 days of logging on, you get access to, well, the final upgrade box. Now, that one there actually has the potential to unlock a Tier 4 premium tank, which I'll show later on. I actually like this idea. Daily log-on rewards for free-to-play games in the free-to-play market is hardly a new thing, but there is some potential benefits floating around in here. The earlier boxes contain bonuses like plus 30% credits for the next match you play, plus 30% RP for the next match you play, and these stack. These are items that sit in an inventory that you can activate at any time. For those players who really enjoy, just doing the 1 day worth of grind, they buy 1 day worth of premium whenever they have the time to play. They don't buy more than that because they don't play War Thunder enough. This can be very good. You spend your days, you just log on once, you get the reward whether you fly a battle or not. Let them stack up in your inventory, and then on that day that you buy premium to come into grind, or that couple of days that you buy premium, you burn these over time. So you'll have, say, the bonus of a premium account that you've just purchased, a 30% RP bonus on that on your X2. That's a hell of a battle if it pops off. Add to that if you happen to have a premium plane floating around that you can use, and you can really make that limited amount of time that you're buying on your premiums for those sort of more casual grinders, really make it work using these, and all you got to do is just log on and then log back off to collect your reward. So, great idea, I love it, 2 thumbs up from down under. I haven't even gotten to the planes yet, and I'm already happy with what I'm seeing this patch, which is a great start. So let's have a look at some of the new planes. So first up, because I know everybody wants to see this thing, the B-29 Superfortress. Battle rating 6.7, Era 4 aircraft. Maximum speed 641 kilometers an hour on the stat card. It's got 6 M2 Browning machine guns, 12.7 millimeters as defensive armament, and carries a standard bomb load of 18 1,000-pound bombs. That's a pretty hefty bomb load. In fact, this is the biggest bomber in the game, biggest aircraft in the game, and it has the biggest bomb load of any bomber in War Thunder. Now, I know many players were worried about this plane re-bringing back the days of the bomber spam, even worse than it currently is. It's not going to be an issue. The 6.7 battle rating prevents that. This thing on Pacific maps will be fighting against aircraft like the R2Y2. On the Russian maps, it'll be fighting against things like the MiG-9, and it has a potential to get up to 7.7 battle rating, so Hokkaido can have everything from Sea Meteors against it, all the way up to the Meteor F4 Longwings, the Vampire, and the Venom. For Germany, I also have a feeling that the Horten 229 and the 50mm 262 are going to be very, very, very popular, but we'll have a look at those in a moment, but they will both face this plane as well. The armour on the aircraft is based mainly around the pilots, with a couple of small armoured panels just ahead of the bomb bay, armour around the control systems for the defensive armament and the rear gunner. Now, when you go over and look at the basics for the aircraft, fuel tank layout, you see the wings are just giant fuel tanks, which is what you would expect from a bomber like this. There is surprisingly very little to hit in the fuselage, so when encountering this plane, aim for the wings. But of course the real question is, how does she fly? Well, she's surprisingly quick. We're looking at around 350 to 400 kilometers an hour level flight speed easy. You possibly push out 450 without too much of an issue whatsoever. It'll dive out to its maximum speed without a problem at all. Its handling is surprisingly good too. For an aircraft of its size, it is very nimble. Like, you're not going to be dogfighting in this thing, but it doesn't fly like a boat. You can see the size of it there. It's 2/3 the length of carrier deck on wingspan. It's huge. During my tests on this aircraft, I found it was actually able to climb at a fairly reasonable rate and maintain speed for a bomber of its size. Getting 10 degrees up and maintaining 400 kilometers an hour wasn't actually incredibly difficult. So coming out of a bomber air spawn, you will be able to take altitude in this aircraft and do some high altitude bombing in it. And as you can see, its turning circle is not bad either. I had no problems with wing braking in the aircraft, although I never tried to turn at speeds in excess of about 550 kilometers an hour, but below those speeds it turned quite well. A little sluggish the faster it got, it definitely had some stiffening, but it's about what you would expect. The whole plane, as a general rule, handled very well. Now, it will require some skill and some tactics on the behalf of bomber pilots to actually get it on target. As I said, it will be fighting low-end jets, or going into battles against low-end jets. However, once you get it there, the amount of firepower it brings into the battle is immense. I still got 9 bombs left after that, taking out 4 ships. Taking out bases and ground targets will be incredibly easy in this. The should have on its maximum bomb load almost enough to take out all 3 bases and almost pop the enemy runway as well. Now, some people don't like that. I look at it this way: at a 6.7 battle rating, if you let a B-29 get all the way around to your bombing targets, take out all 3 of your bombing targets and then unload on your runway, that's not really a problem of the B-29. That's a problem of your team not trying to intercept the B-29. Now, landing the B-29 is going to be surprisingly challenging. I found on my approaches trying to land on the Pearl Harbor runway, even throttling back to 0 and putting into a very gentle dive, it's a plane that really didn't want to lose speed particularly fast, and it's not equipped with air brakes obviously, so it has no way of rapidly slowing down. You're going to have to make a very wide arc and very carefully control your speed down in order to touch down on some of the shorter runways. The longer runways won't be too much of an issue, but it's going to be those short runways that really need extensions for higher tier aircraft that are going to be issues. As you can see here, I throttled back to 0 and was in a glide. I wasn't on a particularly steep dive to bring the aircraft's altitude down. I'm nearly at the end of the runway and I'm still doing over 300 kilometers an hour, and you really don't want to touch this thing down above 250. It'll never stop by the time you hit the end of the runway. So next up we have the American B-57B jet bomber, and this thing is gorgeous to look at. I love the design of this aircraft, I always have. I love the long cockpit. It is just a great looking aircraft. Battle rating 8.0, error 5. We're looking at 8 12.7mm M2 Browning machine guns armament and a standard bomb load of 21 250-pound bombs. 950 kilometers an hour top speed, and the listed turn time is a laughable 58 seconds. Keep in mind the turn times are listed on rudder only. It does not take 58 seconds rather to turn this plane around. 21 250 should be more than enough to take out a couple of bases and or take out a couple of tank convoys on the map, depending on what the pilot wants to do. The Browning 50 caliber machine guns are great defensive armament. The aircraft is maneuverable enough that it should be able to defend itself at least long enough to buy real fighters time to get into location when it gets into a situation with enemy fighters. They're also great for ground strafing. With 2,400 rounds of ammunition, you've got plenty of ammo for taking out soft targets, things like AAA and artillery. It is, well, the inside layout's not much different to the B-57 and Canberra models you already see. Giant fuel tanks mounted right behind the cockpit, fuel tanks on the outer wings, engines in the centre. The interesting part with the armament on this one is it's mounted in the wings, not in the fuselage. Armour-wise is quite simple. It has none. So, first test flight in the B-57B, and this is interesting. We have an open cockpit straight from the word go. Now, it currently doesn't actually have a cockpit model, which is a shame. This is a plane that really wants one. I checked the key bindings and couldn't find an open and closed cockpit binding at this time. However, as soon as you start rolling down the runway, the cockpit automatically closes, which, it does look sexy, I'll give it that. I'm still not entirely sure on exactly how useful a feature this is to be adding into War Thunder at this time, but it most certainly looks good on the runway. Takeoff speed, 250 kilometers an hour is enough to get this thing off the ground. The B-57 models and the Canberra models never really required a particularly high speed to get up. They've got a lot of lift from those wings. Acceleration is good. It doesn't really start to get going until you hit above 350 kilometers an hour, but once you get there, this thing motors on quite nicely. Looks good in the air. Turn time at low speeds, it's a little sluggish, but it's not really at its optimal speed. It's not bad though. I can honestly say, having tested the original flight models for the Canberras and B-57s when they were first put into the game, this plane feels a lot more finished than they did. I didn't really have any issues with wing ripping, although I'm sure it will be a thing if I get out to excessive speeds and started pulling in excess of 6 to 7 Gs. Overall manoeuvrability was good, acceleration was good, the aircraft felt like it had control stiffening when it should have had control stiffening. It felt like what I would expect for a jet bomber that was known for being extremely nimble and manoeuvrable to feel like. Not quite like a fighter, but not bad at all. Now, one thing I did notice doing a couple of practice bombing runs in the B-57B is, unlike the B-29, the bombs are not perfectly accurate. When you're doing low passes at 450, they're pretty much spot on, but if you try dive bombing from at high altitude, leveling out, and then releasing your bombs at in excess of about 600 kilometers an hour, they did seem to move around a lot. So it may be possible that Gaijin is putting a little bit of a spin-off on the unguided bombs, so that extremely high speed releases will not be pinpoint accurate, as they have been in the past. Ignore this bomb release, this was just me jinking the plane before the bomb had a chance to fully leave the bomb bay. So next up we have the 200C1. This is an Era 2 battle rating 2.7 4-engine heavy bomber for Germany. Now this thing, well, it looks a little bit like an early airliner, and that's because that's precisely what it was. This thing was converted from a late 1930s airliner design into a long-range bomber for attacking the Atlantic convoys. Defensive armament is 4 7.92mm MG-15 machine guns. There's only one in each position, however, and 4 positions over the entirety of the aircraft. It also only carries 6 250kg bombs, so it's not incredibly heavy payload. However, the plane is surprisingly fast at 378km/h top speed, and it can actually hit that. It's also surprisingly nimble for an aircraft of its type. Don't expect the TB3 issue with having a very poor manoeuvring aircraft. This thing manoeuvres pretty well. It's no Beaufort or Blenheim, but it's not bad. Inside, of course, this thing is an incendiary round-carrying fighter's wet dream. It is just a flying fuel tank, and that is because it was designed to go extremely long ranges and hassle shipping outside of fighter defence of Great Britain after the fighter defence of America had cleared. That excessively large fuel load is, of course, of absolutely no worth inside of War Thunder, but it is modelled anyway because it is accurate for the aircraft. Again, armour-wise, the pilot's seat is armoured, but honestly, it has none. So the takeoff run on this thing is, well, it's not short, let's put it that way. It does require most of the runway on the test map to be able to get up in the air. You really don't want to lift off until at least 200km/h, otherwise you run the risk of stalling one of the wings on takeoff. It shouldn't have too much of an issue taking off on most of the runways in the game, however, it will be tight. It may require some usage of the flaps in order to lift yourself up on some of the really excessively short runways. So just passing 200km/h, I'm almost at the end of the runway and just getting ready to lift. Wheels up at 212km/h without too much of an issue. It feels quite nice. Now it is losing speed straight away, but I have taken a fairly aggressive climb to get up over the trees, make sure I've got plenty of clearance. However, once I levelled it out, it gained its speed back and was able to accelerate out to a 300km/h and beyond level flight rate, which was quite nice. Now I'm beginning to do the gun testing now, and as you can see, the upper rear defensive gunner actually has quite an interesting angle of attack on his gun. He's actually able to fire almost 45 degrees forward of the centre point of the aircraft. However, both the forward, upper and lower defensive gunners only have an arc of about 20 degrees in front of the aircraft they can hit. What's interesting about both of the forward defensive gunners is they are unable to fire directly in front of the aircraft. There is a blind spot straight down this thing's nose where none of the forward defensive armament can actually hit. The lower gunner has a similar firing arc, although not quite as good as the upper rear defensive gunner. All the aircraft's defensive gunners have a blind spot directly above and below the aircraft in an arc of about 30 degrees where none of the defensive fire can hit as well. So there are some blind spots that can be exploited on this aircraft. The defensive armament is light, but it is only, it is a low-level bomber. It's not going to be encountering anything particularly high, and it is reasonably fast for its battle rating, so I think it will do fairly well. And as you can see, the turn time on the aircraft is quite good as well. It's fairly nippy getting itself around for something that's got 4 engines. So next up we have Russia's brand new IL-2 1941. I'm not going to bother showing you the test flight for this one because it flies like every other IL-2 in the game. Nothing particularly special about it. I'm not sure why we needed another one, but okay. Era 2, battle rating 2.7, 220mm Shivaks with 300 rounds of ammunition, 2 7.62mm Shika's machine guns, 1,500 rounds of ammunition, fuel tank in front of and behind the pilot, but the entire nose cone of the aircraft is wrapped in armour, no fuel tanks in the wings. It's an IL-2. No love for Britain in this patch, however, Japan got a new Era 4 premium aircraft. 3,850 gold, which is actually quite cheap for an Era 4 premium aircraft. You can have the J2M4 Kai Raiden. Now, if you want to find out what this thing is like, I'm not going to bother showing you the flight testing, but I recently did a video on the J2M3 that is available in the Tech Tree as standard. This thing is exactly the same aircraft. I believe there were supposed to be some differences in terms of performance, but currently it appears to be using exactly the same flight model. It flies exactly the same as the J2M3 that is currently in the tree. Now, normally I'm not incredibly interested in the release of new premium vehicles, however this is one where I think it's warranted. Up until this point, all Japan has had access to in regards to Era 4 premiums is the A6M5 Co, it's a great aircraft. I love my A6M5, but not everyone enjoys the Zeros, and the B-17G, which I thought was a horrible addition as a premium for the Japanese lineup. The J2, this is a much better idea. I'm really glad they added this for those who are looking for something else as an Era 4 premium aircraft. So next up, the tanks. Now, I'm not going to bother taking these out for test runs, but the US line does have the new edition of an Era 4 premium, the M26E1. 7,450 gold to buy it outright. This is also the tank that is available in that 13-day reward package that you can potentially win. It's an M26, battle rating 6.3, 90mm gun, carries a 7.62mm machine gun as, it's machine gun armament. It's a good tank, it's got good armour. You can test this one yourself once it goes onto live server. There's not really much to be gained by showing how tanks drive, because one tank drives like the others. Armour-wise, it's pretty well armoured. We're looking at effective armours of around 150mm. We've got 114 on the mantlet. It's not bad. I think it's a pretty suitable premium. It'll be interesting to see how it performs. Next up, Germany. Now, they get two new vehicles this patch. They get a 45mm Pak 40-3 L46 armed version of the Marder. It is, it's just a Pak 40 version of the Marder. Don't expect anything too special here. It's got a slightly different design for its layout of its armour, but the armour is still thin as paper, so taking hits is not what this does. Like you can see, 15mm, it doesn't matter where you shoot it, you're going to pen. 50mm on the front sections, honestly, nobody's going to shoot it there, and at the battle rating it's got of 3, most things that do shoot it there will pen it anyway. Inside it's a giant ammo rack and set of fuel tanks with a massive gun attached. I like the Marder, don't get me wrong, I really do like this tank. It's not one that you can really show off that way. This is something that you hide on a hill and snipe enemies with. It'll be interesting to see how accurate the 45mm is, however. It could make for a damn good tank. And then, of course, there is the Mighty Mouse, battle rating 8, Era 5, German heavy tank. We all know about this thing. It's been posted all over the Reddit forums, the official forums. Information on this thing has been everywhere. It is a rolling pillbox. Top speed, 21 kilometers an hour, which is actually faster than I expected it to be. Turret traverse speed, 9 degrees a second, which is, actually, just thinking about it, that's probably faster than what I expected as well. Armoured to buggery all over, has a shot trap underneath the front mantlet section. It's a tank that will do really well if you know how to angle both your armour and your turret at the same time. Armament, 75mm as a secondary gun, and 128mm as the primary gun, 68 shots on the primary, 100 on the secondary. It's the Mouse. It's a monster. I don't know how well this is going to perform in War Thunder, but I am bloody interested in finding out. Now, I almost forgot one here. Germany actually got access to another Tiger. They got access to the E variant, which is, it's largely the same as the H variant we already had, minus a few changes to the armour around the mantlet, and obviously a different look. The big difference between the H and the E, however, isn't actually physical to the tank itself, it's in the ammunition available for it. The E variant gets APCR. Now, when this was first announced, this thing was marked at 5.7, and the old H variant had actually gone down to 5.3. On this version of the test server, this tank is now at 6, and the old H version is back at 5.7. Honestly, this is something that I don't particularly have a problem with. I was a little worried about the H variant of the Tiger. Actually, dropping it down to 5.3 means it could potentially face 4.3 tanks. That could be problematic in terms of the game. So I'm not really opposed to this change. I think it's fine. It'll be interesting to see how it runs into battle and if any further adjustment is needed. So Russia, they got a T-28. Yay. Let's not bother looking at it. So there were a number of other changes, including BR adjustments as well as new additions to aircraft. For example, the Twin Mustang now has access to its 50 caliber machine gun pod. The 50mm ARM 262 is now only battle rating 6.7. Well, there was multiple other changes, but this is the last one I want to show off. So we've got the Horten. Now, first things first, it has a gun sight and a position where you can actually bloody use it, which is just great. It means I can finally fly this thing around from inside the cockpit and be able to aim at targets without having to zoom in all the time. Also, it has the folding back cockpit, or the opening cockpit, modelled as well, so that is sexy. You remember the year that this thing was designed in. This was designed and built in 1944, 1945. That looks gorgeous. And obviously it's got new engines, and well, I can tell you right now the takeoff run is a lot faster than it used to be. This thing is going to be a lot more fun to fly than it was before, and I used to love flying it before, so expect a Horten video in the future. 300 kilometers an hour already. Accelerating in a climb quite comfortably and at a fairly reasonable rate too for a 6.3 battle rating aircraft. Just getting up to speed at the moment, and we'll throw it into a tight turn and see how it handles it, because I have been told the wing braking point has been increased as well. So we push this out well past 470, we're 480, we're going to get it close to 500. That'll do. 10 Gs, the wings are still attached, and oh yes. Oh yeah. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. So final verdict on what I've seen, I have absolutely no complaints with this patch at all. I think Gaijin has done a really good job, and I can't wait for it to go live. Fly smart, fly safe, I'll catch you in the skies.